On this episode of the Pit Therapy Podcast, we talk about the band Poison the Well. We talk about all the influence they had on all the bands we listened to growing up. We talked about their sound changes and honestly how good they have always been. So thanks for jumping on and let's open this pit up.
Somebody hit somebody!
What's up, everyone? Thanks for jumping on to this episode of the Pit Therapy Podcast. I'm Kyle and I'm joined with Trevor. So what's up, man?
Not much, man. We got Josh was just coming back off vacation, so he'll catch up with us next week. But yeah, I mean, Happy New Year, right?
Yeah, sure.
I know we dropped an episode coming into the new year, but this is the first one we're actually recording in 2024. So, what'd you guys do for the New Year's?
Nothing, honestly. Just hung out at home. Yeah, I don't even know what we ate or did anything. So
yeah, no, for us, we went to my parents. We had dinner with my family. My sisters were over. We played some games and a few things like that. But then we came back to our house around 8, 9 o'clock, and just made some we made brownies with the kids, and then we hung out. They did a little dance party, and we may or may not have rolled the clock back an hour and went to bed a minute early. But the best thing ever was we had like community buy-in because 11 o'clock hit and there were fireworks going off all around us. It was awesome. So it worked out just great.
I don't know what it was this year, but like these holidays just didn't hit the same. Like Christmas was cool, but I was kind of ready for it to be over. And that's like weird coming from me, right? Because I love Christmas, weird. But I don't know what it was this year. Christmas, I was ready for it to be done. And then New Year's, we were just like, whatever.
You guys have been sick, though.
Yeah, kind of.
You guys have had some stuff running through your house, I feel like. And I feel like we kind of beat the horse dead pretty good on your Christmas Yuletide spirit. So maybe we turned
I just burned myself out.
maybe we turned you a little bit into a Scrooge. You talked so much about how excited you were, how happy you were, and how great it all is that Christmas hit, and you were just like, no, Trevor's right. This kind of sucks.
Oh, yeah, maybe. We'll see. Would you got any good plans for 2024 then? What's one resolution you have?
Oh man, I don't do resolutions. They all
really?
fell in like 2 weeks. But no, I mean, more or less, it's just kind of what you always want at the beginning of the year. I want to be more healthy. I want to get more active. Started to go to the gym with one of our buddies and a few things like that. So I'm excited to just feel better overall. And then, I don't know, man. We have like a cruise planned coming up here in a month or two and a couple just family vacations, but no big plans for this year. There's no big milestones or anything like that in our lives.
Yeah.
So, what about you guys?
Nothing. We got nothing.
I am excited. I think that I will go to a lot more shows this year, especially doing this. I think that I'll be a lot more involved in going to shows and seeing a bunch of bands, a few that I've already kind of circled on the calendar that I'm excited for. So we'll hopefully start to make it out to those.
Yeah. Well, and this will lead into the band we're talking about today, but the intro, well, not intro, but like the first few bands they've announced for Furnace Fest this coming year.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to miss that. Like, I'm not going to. I'm going to just even if I have to like camp in the back of my truck in a Walmart parking lot, like that's probably what I'm going to do.
Yeah. So, no, those first 4 bands. So it was Poison the Well, Shai Hulud, Under Oath, and who was the 4th?
I don't remember who the 4th was. Mostly because I couldn't get past when I read Poison the Well and Shai Hulud.
Right. It was, hold on, I'm pulling it here. I think I have it at my fingertips. Stretch Armstrong. Stretch Armstrong is the 4th one there. So, and
oh, that's right. And they haven't played. Well, I think they did a couple reunion shows, but I freaking love Stretch Armstrong.
Yeah. So this is going to be interesting because Furnace Fest will typically kind of group the types of bands together that's going to be there. So it feels like this is going to be a pretty heavy metalcore year.
Metalcore, post-hardcore.
Metalcore, post-hardcore. But I think it's going to lean a little bit more metalcore. So it'll be interesting to see who comes on. I'm trying to think of some of the old ones. Maybe we see a Misery Signals
That'd
get
be
thrown on
sick.
there.
Yeah.
It Dies Today. I know they were just on there last year, but maybe they come back. Who
Well,
else?
they did. I don't know if you follow Furnace Fest on social media, but they did do like what's your wish list for 2024,
Yeah,
and people were naming like there were not a lot of bands that I was like no, all, like people were pretty based with what they were recommending to where it's like if they even get half of those bands, this is going to be one of the greatest festivals ever.
yeah. What? So if you could put another, let's say another four on there in this vein, what are you looking for?
Oh shoot, I don't know. I mean, obviously there's like the stuff that would never happen, right? Like I don't think Have Heart ever is going to play again, or like Sleeping Giant, because those would be perfect. You
Okay.
know, you know who I would love to see come back. Did you ever listen to Close Your Eyes?
Yeah,
I think they would be a good fit for like
that'd be a
this
cool one.
festival. I don't know what ones can you think of?
Like the bands, so these four are probably going to be like what we call like the headliners, right? So it's probably not going to be one bigger than this. Like, honestly, what I would love is freaking Parkway Drive coming back, playing Killing with a Smile,
That would be nuts.
Horizons. Like, let's get old Parkway at this type of thing. But I don't think that's too big of a name for them not to have announced as
Maybe.
like one of the headliners. Possible, but that would be something. Uh, Bands that you recently saw, I think that Comeback Kid and Stick to Your
Stick
Guns
to your guns.
would
Yeah.
both be super solid on this. Like these bands are a little bit different than this, but give me some old school Devil Wears Prada. Like have them go play Plagues at When We Were Young Fest and love it so much they want to come play Plagues at Furnace Fest. Like I'd take
Yeah.
some old school Devil Wears Prada.
What about like Alexis on Fire or do like a
Yeah,
Boy Sets Fire set playing after the eulogy?
yeah. I mean, a bunch of the bands that we've talked about.
Yeah,
Boy Sets
right.
Fire, Alexis on Fire,
From
From
Autumn to
Autumn to
Ashes.
Ashes.
Yeah.
That'd be super sick. Yeah. I think that there's a ton of cool stuff and possibly there. Uh Alexis on Fire already play it though?
I think they've done it before. I think they did it a
From
couple of
Autumn to
years ago.
Ashes did, right?
Yeah, but that was like a long time ago. I say a long
So,
time ago, but I think pre-COVID.
oh, okay. So,
A Static
yeah.
Lullaby would be sick.
Oh man. I'd love to see a Stack Lullaby on something like this. You know, I bet like Bleeding Through ends up on here. Bury Your Dead might show up kind of thing. But
Who
I feel
knows?
like that's kind of
As
the
I lay
vein.
dying, as I lay dying, playing. Oh, what's the album? Hold on.
Shadows Are Security. Is
Yep.
that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be sick. But I also think that there's enough As I Lay Dying hate that my guess is they probably don't get thrown on there.
I don't, dude. Like, I get what that dude did was super messed up, but at this point, like the band's forgiven them. They've toured. They've released new music.
No, they haven't. Everyone quit.
What are you talking about? They just released an album when he got out of jail.
Yeah, and then everyone quit. And now it's Tim and four other dudes.
When that? I guess I missed that one.
Like he came out of prison, like it looked like they'd reconciled. They put out a couple of songs, and then I think his name's Nick, the guitarist, who's like the Polynesian dude. He bailed, and then quickly the other guys bailed too.
Interesting.
So
Well, I
yeah,
missed that drama. Dang.
yep. So it yeah.
Okay, so scratch that. I guess they're not playing.
Yeah, I don't think that As I Lay Dying makes it. I'd go watch As I Lay Dying. I think that they're sick. I love old school As I Lay Dying. And actually Shaped by Fire, it wasn't bad. I actually like some of those songs too.
Yeah, it was all right.
So it was cool. But yeah, man.
So what have you been listening to lately?
Okay, so I was thinking about this. We just did the MySpace episode.
Yeah.
I realized how ingrained I was into that version of metalcore. And so like this week, I listened to a ton of like the old metalcore, the stuff that like we should have been listening to,
Okay.
right? Get some of the like the digital aspects out there. And oh dude, it felt so good to just like listen to a bunch of it. So I had on like a bunch of the band that we're going to talk about, Converge. I don't know why we like act like people don't know who we're talking about. It's literally the title of the episode.
I know.
So
We're talking, Poison the Well. So just say
we're talking Poison the Well. So obviously, I listened to a ton of Poison the Well. I listened to a bunch of Converge. I listened to a bunch of Cave In and Integrity and some
Nice.
like old metal,
Dude, here's one.
old hard.
Botch.
I
Have you
see.
ever-
I had them on my list, but I didn't listen to them.
Okay. So here's something super weird. And it's kind of funny how, I don't know, the world, the universe works in mysterious ways. Did you ever listen to Minus the Bear?
Yeah.
So I threw them on because I was in a weird, I rode my longboard a little bit over the
Okay.
break. And so I was in like a weird, just like cruising on a longboard type mood. And I always listen to Minus the Bear. Did you know that a couple of those guys came from Botch?
No.
Which if you haven't listened to Botch, they're a lot like Converge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just like, it just made me laugh. I was like, that's a connection I would have never made. Because
Sure.
if you listen to Minus the Bear, you should literally be like surfing and then rolling up to a bonfire. And that's like the vibe from Minus the Bear, you know?
Sure. Sure.
But yeah, they played in Botch, which is wild.
Huh. That's interesting. But yeah, no, that is weird. But yeah, so that's what I mostly listened to this week is a bunch of just like old metalcore, the stuff that like led into actual metalcore. But and then the stuff that like was direct influenced by metalcore as well. There was a band called oh shoot, I'm not gonna remember their name now. Renounced. Have you listened to Renounced? So they're a newer band, but they specifically pulled from early 2000s metalcore style. They had an album come out in 2019 called Beauty is a Destructive Angel, and it's like a good solid throwback. It has better
Cool.
production,
Yeah.
right? But it's a good solid throwback metalcore album. It was definitely solid. So,
So
yes, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, like, I this week was 100% on the same boat as you.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, I shed a tear. Like, a single tear was shed listening to this generation of metalcore
Yep.
and then thinking about what it's become now.
Yep.
It's not even the same music. Like, it's not.
No.
It is so different. When you listen to stuff like Converge or Poison the Well or Botch or, you know, you can even go like to Earth Crisis and stuff like that. It's like, it's not even the same like genre anymore.
I know.
And then you put on freaking Spirit Box and you're like, what happened? You know, like,
Right.
look at what they did to my boy. They massacred my boy, you know? It killed me. And because I was like, man, this stuff is so good. So good.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like what I really missed and what I really like with this old stuff is the high, it's like a high scream, but it's like the fry, like the person who's screaming, it hurts that person screaming. You know what I mean? Like we're gonna talk about it, but opposite of December, the higher stuff, we had that in like From Autumn to Ashes. We had it with the first Alexis on Fire. Like the higher, it was like what metalcore was. And then we started to get into some of the more you could understand them, the lower stuff. You see this on You Comes Before You. Is that what the album's called?
Yeah.
With these guys. But like that early, harsh, higher vocals and stuff like that, it's just so sick. And that's what like Cave In was and stuff. Like I've never really listened to Cave In. Did you listen to Cave In very much?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. So I have not really listened to Cave In. And they, a couple of times, Poison the Well has said they were like huge influences, especially on Opposite of December. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go pull that first album, 1998. I think it's something Hypothermia. Anyways, so I pulled that one and I listened to that one a couple of times. And it's such a good, solid album too. I missed a lot of this.
Right.
It's sad.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't miss as much of it. I didn't appreciate it as much as I should have back
Maybe
in the
maybe
day
that's what I should say.
because
Like,
my brother introduced me to Poison the Well.
yeah,
And so like I was aware of a lot of the stuff like Botch, like Poison the Well, like Converge, because that was like the heaviest my brother ever got. And so like, but I think I was just too young to really appreciate it, you know?
I think that
So
that's the right way to say it because I knew all these bands, right? And I've heard them from time to time, but to like sit down and put an actual album on and listen through it front to back, the first time I realized that I had missed a bunch of this stuff was with Misery Signals when we talked about Misery Signals.
right.
Because like listening to what's the first one with the dude, the heart crap, I don't remember what it's called. That album's so good.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was just like, gosh dang, I missed out. I got too into the techno. I got too into the heavy bass drops.
Of Malice and the Magnum Heart.
That's the one. Yep.
Yeah.
That's the one. So,
Yeah. Well, and okay, so we can just start getting into it. The band that we are talking about this week, like we said, Poison the Well, based out of Florida, metalcore, but like real metalcore, none of this garbage that you hear today. Started in 1997, but under a couple different names, right? Because I think they were still in high school when they first started out. Two names were Doubting Thomas and An Acre Lost, which Doubting Thomas is kind of a weird name. Glad they changed that. An Acre Lost is not the worst, but Poison the Well is just perfect. Chef's
Yeah.
kiss. It's a great name for a metalcore
Yes.
band. So I couldn't find anything before The Opposite of December, A Season of Separation, which was their first album. Were you able to find anything?
So they actually re-released it. Distance only makes the heart grow fonder. They actually re-released it in 2022. That was actually the first EP that they put out.
Okay.
So it may have even no, I think they were called Poison the Well at the time. I was going to say they may have even been called An Acre Lost when they were putting this out. But yeah, that was prior to The Opposite of December.
Okay. What did you think of that? Their E EP.
So this is the only one that had different vocalist. I want to say they even had two vocalists. It was a lot more metal based. Like you could hear the hardcore influence come in on The Opposite of December. It was good. I mean, it's very aggressive,
Yeah.
But knowing what comes next, like it's pretty far down on the list.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you got to think though, if they're releasing this in late 90s,
yeah,
like first of all, they're super young and they're already discovering a sound like that. Unbelievable.
Yep.
Especially like you said, when you think about the next album, which is The Opposite of December, A Season of Separation, which was 1999, was recorded in, I think, 8 days, which is just unbelievable as well.
Yeah. While you're looking at your notes, we've talked about this several times though. The albums that are like game-changing albums are recorded in just like neck-breaking speed. Like they're like sleep deprived, literally just grinding it out for like 14 to 16 hours a day kind of thing. And then it's just incredible stuff that they drop.
Yeah. So let's kind of talk about, think about 1999. Let's talk about music in general, because there were bands that were playing a form of metalcore and stuff, right? With like Earth Crisis. Because when was Earth Crisis?
Like 94, I think is when a lot of that was coming out. 96, I think was Firestorm.
95 is Destroy the Machines, Earth Crisis. So it's not even that much. I guess in terms of music, that is kind of early, right? 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah. But on top of that, that Earth Crisis was more hardcore based.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was Firestorm really with Earth Crisis that set that kind of metalcore stamp with Earth Crisis as well. And
that was 96. So that's
right. A couple years earlier.
Yeah.
And then, like I was saying, Cave In, they, quite frankly, like I think they're labeled more as just metal, but they have a lot of metalcore based sounds as well.
Yeah.
One of the things about like early metalcore that I picked up on a lot was like the spoken word parts. That's like a very big early 2000s, late 90s aspect of this metalcore scene. And Cave In had a bunch of that on Beyond Hypothermia.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, listen, if you guys are like listening to Cave In, that's why there's so much spoken word on the opposite of December.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. No, I mean that makes sense. But just thinking about other music, like metal's probably pretty big right now.
mhm.
Thrash is coming out, which
Thrash is massive right now.
people have said that like thrash is just a mix up of metal and punk. A lot of punk music right now. Pop punk is probably starting to kind of find its. I mean,
Somewhat,
Josh always references like H2O and stuff. I know they were around in like the late
yeah,
90s and stuff. Blink's probably getting pretty close. Green Day and all that, right? They're probably starting to find that sound.
that's true. That's true. Some of that earlier pop sound. Okay. Yeah, I see where you're going with that.
There's really nobody that's playing this.
Yeah, it's very underground right now.
Yeah.
This scene is very underground. There are bands who are doing it or a form of it, but no one who's like making massive waves. And this is where the opposite of December became so monumental to metalcore. Was Trustkill came in, they signed him, and like that album, they just marketed it super well.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't sell a ton, like in today's standards, right? I think it sold like 30,000 or 50,000 copies or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
But it was, at least in Canada, I don't know about worldwide, but at least at the time, it was United States and Canada. And Jesse actually from Misery Signals credits this album as like a huge part of the Misery Signals sound because it was accessible to him. He didn't have other metalcore stuff coming to him. Like they didn't have a way to get it. But this album made it to Canada,
Mm,
which is why this was so monumental.
yeah.
Because it birthed so much just because of everyone had it. Or at least the scene had it,
Yeah,
right?
that's interesting because Converge. So Converge had albums before Poison the Well,
They did.
but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that it was maybe as accessible.
I think
Because
that's what it was.
I mean, you hear people talk about Converge, but I
They
don't
talk
know
about
that.
Jane Doe though. They talk about
Right,
2001.
right. And a lot of people get into Converge because they find bands like Poison the Well, and then they go look for more. Right. Maybe it's just an issue with us because we're out west and Converge is like a Massachusetts Northeast
Yeah,
band, and I feel like a lot of the scene up in the Northeast had just kind of stayed there because
sure.
they could.
Sure.
But being down in Florida, you probably couldn't do that. The label did a better job. I don't know. I'm not saying that like Converge or Poison the Well is better one or the other. I think that's an interesting point that you're right. Poison the Well might have been more accessible. Like I heard Poison the Well. I didn't hear Converge until I was older and went looking for more stuff like Poison the Well.
Well, and I'll also say that I think that Poison the Well sound is more accessible than Converge. So Poison the Well actually
It's
credits
true.
Poison the Well credits Converge actually a lot for the writing also. So like the article I was reading, right? They talked about Cave In, they talked about Converge as being like big influences. They talked about Refused was really
Okay.
big back then.
Oh,
And
Refused
then
is so sick.
yeah. And then they talked about the 80s, 90s hardcore scene. So, you had your Bad Brains, you had your Minor Threats. Like, this is why they are metal core, right? Because they had the hard, metallic, hardcore influence.
Yeah.
Like, that's what they are. But the Converges and stuff like that were a big aspect of what they were doing. Converge is a little too chaotic, even for me today. Like as I was listening to him, I was like, yeah, I'm not a massive mathcore guy. Like I don't love all the off time stuff, but Poison the Well does just enough to keep it interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. I feel the same way. I really like Converge, especially being the music buff that I am. You have to respect what they did.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. Poison the Well, especially this first album, is a lot more accessible from a sound
Yeah.
standpoint. So the opposite of December, Season Separation, it's their first album. What did you think about this album?
It's their best album in my opinion. Like I think that even for a 1999 album, the way that they recorded the sound on it,
Sounds so good.
it's still good. Yeah, it's awesome. However, they chose to record it was great and it's held up. Is Nerdy the foundation of a metalcore song? Like, is that what we base metalcore off of? Is basically the song Nerdy?
That
Like,
and even the song before it, Slice Paper Wrist. Holy cow.
oh yeah. I mean, they're all good, right? You're coming right out 12/23/93. Like, that's such a good song. Like you said, Slice Paper Wrist. But Nerdy, though, it just like, I think that's the formula that everyone copied.
Yeah.
It was the screamy, the riff, then the clean chorus kind of thing, and then back to the screamy, and then a breakdown. You know what I mean? Like, it is the literal metalcore formula.
Yeah.
And so, like, I was sitting there listening to it because it's obviously the most popular song on the album. And then everyone says that this is such a foundational album for metalcore. And I was like, okay, well, let's take it a step further. Like, Nerdy is that song, in my opinion. So, no, it's great.
What's interesting is like I asked some people on the interwebs, and everybody pretty much says that their favorite album is You Come Before You. But everybody says that, like, that's their favorite album. But it's kind of interesting. They'll say that You Come Before You is their favorite album, but Opposite of December is their best album.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, I don't know if that makes any sense. That probably doesn't make any sense, but that it's like you can appreciate and listen to this album and understand how great it is and the importance of it. Even though it might not be your favorite, you can't ignore the fact that this is a landmark album in metalcore in the genre. For an album coming out in, like, what did I say, 98, 99?
99.
As freaking heavy as it is, dude, it's unbelievable. You know, no one at that time. I mean, there was hardcore, but hardcore at this time was really fast. Like they didn't really break down. They did, but not really. Like the Earth Crisis stuff, still pretty fast and hardcore, and kind of. The only way I could describe it is kind of scripted in the music, right?
Sure.
You know, it flows a lot better. Whereas this is just, we've talked about it a lot, so heavy without being just like so heavy. But then parts of it are just like to the definition, just so freaking heavy.
Yeah.
So I remember being in my basement with my brother, 9 years old, I guess, when this came out.
Yeah.
And
9 years old.
9 years old, and just being like, I don't know what I'm listening to, but I want to hit somebody.
Sure.
You know, and it probably led to me trying to hit my brother, and then he just beat me up.
But yeah, like I was saying, I was listening to Integrity. I was listening to some Ringworm. I was listening to Cave In. What you just said, though, hardcore was fast. Those bands were slow. Like, this bridged the gap. Yeah. This is why they are credited with creating that formula. You know what I mean? And so you're right. Like, it amped you up. It got you excited. It had that hardcore aspect. And then it was just like, boom. You know what I mean? Like, there it is. That's the breakdown. That's what we all love. We love going fast to slow and feeling that dynamic shift. So, I'm right there with you.
Their like singing parts weren't cheesy, which I feel like you do get into with some of the metalcore, especially the later metalcore bands. The singing gets kind of difficult. The singing in this album, and even in their later albums, like, it felt like it had its place in it. It didn't feel forced. It didn't feel weird. It didn't feel awkward. It didn't feel cringy. It was done really, really well, which I guess in order to be metalcore or like post-hardcore, you kind of have to have some of the more melodic singing parts. Sometimes it's difficult. Some of the From Autumn to Ashes singing parts get a little cringy, right? I never felt this way, especially in this first album. I've never felt this way.
I will agree with you 100% there. And I actually would say the same thing throughout all of their discography. I don't think there's a part in their discography where I was like, oh man, that singing's rough. Like I was actually I typed this out in my notes, but we did the top 5 post-hardcore vocalists, right? And I know that we start out metalcore, but they end in post-hardcore.
Yeah.
Does Jeff Morera, or however you say his name, get enough credit? Like, should he have been someone that we were talking about because of Versions and because of the Tropic Rot? Like, those are definitely post-hardcore albums. Even You Come Before You
Yeah.
starts to lean into that post-hardcore realm.
Yep.
I think that he deserved more credit than I remember, at least. So
Yeah. So before we get into the next album, a couple of the bands that they toured with. So they did a tour with Unearth and with Martyr AD.
yeah,
Martyr AD is another one of those that I guess we could throw in with this like larger group of
yeah,
like metalcore and stuff. But man, I would have killed to see that tour. Like
Yeah.
absolutely killed to see that tour. So
yep. See, and this is what I'm saying. Like, I just feel like this early wave of metalcore, like, I just didn't appreciate it enough.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I was going back through and I was looking, and I'm like, I've seen Poison the Well, but I don't remember ever going to a show for Poison the Well.
Oh, see, what show were you talking about?
So I went through all their years. The ones I picked out that, like, I'm pretty sure I was there was the Under Oath, Maylene, Every Time I Die, and Poison the Well show.
Yeah. Yep. I remember that one.
Yep, we were there. That was 2007. And then there was a Poison the Well, Dance Gavin Dance, and the Chariot show that rolled through.
I remember that one too.
Like, the Under Oath show, I was there for Maylene and Under Oath. This was even before I was there, before, like, Every Time I Die, right? And then the Poison the Well, Dance Gavin Dance, and the Chariot, like, people can crap on me. I was there for Dance Gavin Dance. Like, 2008 Dance Gavin Dance, that's who I was going to see.
Good thing Josh isn't on this one.
I know, right? He could crap on me later.
You'd have gotten blasted for that.
But yeah, like, those are, I know I was at those shows, and like, I can remember Maylene, I can remember Under Oath, I can even remember Every Time I Die. I don't remember Poison the Well.
See, I remember
Poison
the Well. Yeah, for sure.
So yeah,
but I don't think they were playing a lot of their older stuff on these shows.
I mean, they would have been playing You Comes Before You.
So that's the album. That's the album that I vividly remember listening to. Like, I remember the other ones, but like, that's the album where I was like, yep, I like Poison the Well is in my list of bands that I like. You know what I mean?
And I remember listening to that album as well, and I remember liking it, but it wasn't something I put on. Like, I don't even think I own the album.
Okay.
Anyway, what kind of thing?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's the level of extent that I had with Poison the Well.
Okay. Well, that's all right. We'll get into the rest of their stuff. But next album, so they had some. Okay. Well, the next real album that gets released is Tear from the Red.
Yep.
And that's 2002. But yeah, released in February, still on Trustkill. Honestly, they don't deviate very much from the opposite of December.
No. And in fact, they probably leaned more into the metalcore sound on this one.
Right. So what did you think of this album?
In my opinion, this is their worst album, which is kind of weird to say, because typically I'm like the metalcore guy on here, and like, this is like the metalcore formula. But I think that that's why I have it so far down, is it was just, they had a breakdown in almost every song. You know what I mean? And it was a very similar breakdown. It was one of those very staccato-y breakdowns, you know? Don't get me wrong. This album's incredible. Like, that's not what I'm saying at all. Like, I absolutely loved sitting down and listening to this. Sticks and Stones Never Made Sense. Insane. That song is so good. Turn Down Elliot, an incredible song.
Incredible. Botchla.
Amazing. I mean, like, the way that song starts, you would never have expected how it was going to end, kind of thing. So great,
Yeah.
great album. But I don't know. Like when I first started going through their discography, this was probably number 2 for me. Running through everything, all of a sudden it's at number 5.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting.
So the way I felt about these first 2 albums was if you're in 2023 or 2024 now and you're listening to Poison the Well, like this is probably a pretty foreign sound to a lot of people because they just don't do it anymore. I feel like you and I going back and listening to it, like the first one, we understand the significance of it. So you place it higher. The second one's just as good, but from your and my perspective, it's kind of a repeat of their first album.
Yep.
So we're going to drop it down a little bit. But to anyone else, man, this album is still way better than most metalcore that you're listening to today. Hands down.
Dude,
Absolutely.
as I was reading lists, I couldn't believe how many people had this album as number 1.
Oh, really?
There was a lot of
Okay.
like people who were like, I was getting into metalcore right during the early 2000s. I missed The Opposite of December. Terror from the Red was my first Poison the Well album, and it is front to back, no skips. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And so they have so much nostalgia for it. This is a great, great metalcore album. There's no disputing that.
I think like some of the last few bands that we've done, well, not the last few, especially the last one for the Fallen Dreams, when I was listening, especially to their older stuff, I would get like halfway through the album and I'd go look and be like, oh man, it's not done yet. But like this album and the one before it, The Opposite of December, the album finished and the music stopped and I was like, oh dang, like this album's done. This sucks.
Yeah.
Because it's so good. Like I just listened to the whole album and I'm just so like engaged in it. Even this one, which you're right. I don't think it's their worst. Like, and we say worst very loosely, right? Because we're not saying bad. We're just saying out of their albums.
Number 5 out of the 5. Yes,
okay,
number 5 out of the 5.
I'll disagree because the last 2, Tropic Rot and Inversions, I think I like this one more than those.
Okay.
But the point I wanted to make was it was really cool to be listening to a band. And it was like this with all their albums, but I noticed it specifically with these first 2 is that all of a sudden the album ended and I was like, oh, dang. Like I just listened to 30, 45 minutes of this album and was just completely enthralled with it, right? Like I was just so like enraptured by these albums that I didn't even know that I'd listened to it for 45 minutes or whatever, you know?
So my experience with that is I had these on at the gym and I was sitting there listening and all of a sudden it would end and Spotify just goes to something similar, right? And all of a sudden something else would come on. I'd be like, that's not Poison the Well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was like, oh crap! Like I gotta go switch it back up.
Yeah, but that's just how good these albums were.
Exactly.
Because like I said, some of these other albums, I just like, is it over yet? But this one was like, oh dang, it's over.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be over. I'm gonna go back and listen to it. So I don't know. Great album. Went through a couple of the songs. So yeah, the next one. Well, before we get there, it doesn't matter. The next one, You Come Before You. So like I said, this was the album that really, I guess, is more of a nostalgia hit for me because this is when me of my own free will sat down and put on Poison the Well and really got into an album. And I very vividly remember the album cover with the sunflower guy being like, it's freaking weird, but I'm down with it. And yeah, so You Come Before You, 2003. I think they changed labels.
Yes, this is Atlantic. So this is when they're on a major label.
Yeah. Leans more towards the post-hardcore sound. So what did you think of this album? What do you remember about it?
You know, as much as you just said it leans towards the post-hardcore sound, there's post-hardcore aspects, but this is very clearly still a metalcore album.
Okay.
At least in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like if you want to say it's leaning towards post-hardcore, there's some dabbling there, but it is heavy. There's no post-hardcore band in 2003 that's doing this heavy. So, it definitely starts to bridge those gaps. And the reason why everyone loves this album so much is because of those post-hardcore aspects. Like everything I was reading is like The album is the most accessible, which I agree with, right? If you like the metalcore sound and you like the post-hardcore sound, or if you like post-hardcore and you couldn't quite get into metalcore, this is an album for you. If you liked metalcore and post-hardcore wasn't your thing, this is an album for you. Like, it
Yeah.
bridges the gap both ways. The way that this album starts out, freaking Ghost Chant, man, that opening drum pattern, that riff, it is so sick. And it gave way to a lot of the Southern riffs that we started to hear,
Hmm.
right? This is probably an album that influenced a lot of Southern bands that came after them, or at
Yeah.
least the Southern parts in some of those bands.
I don't know. When I hear this album, especially that first song, I just think of Finch.
Dude, Say Hello to Sunshine is just a more post-hardcore version of Poison the Well. Me coming for
100%.
you.
100%.
That was an album that I actually put on because you had made that comment earlier about Finch, and it was already something that was kind of going through my mind. But I went and listened to Say Hello to Sunshine again, and I was just like, gosh dang, man.
Yeah.
Like, there's so
I know.
much aspect of it here. So
But see, with this album, I honestly feel like this album probably influenced the larger generation of music that we listen to.
without a doubt.
Things like Norma Jean, 100%. And the Chariot, right? Because I know the guys from Norma Jean leave and they start the Chariot. There's no Norma Jean or the Chariot without this album. I even start to hear things like stuff from Define the Great Line. And when they get a little more chaotic and like disambiguation with Under Oath, like I hear huge Poison the Well influences on those albums. Like I think Under Oath with Define the Great Line did it a little more like structured and a little less heavy, less chaotic. But absolutely you can hear the sounds because this album to me got like a little darker.
Yes.
Not necessarily heavier, but a little darker. And then you overlay that with some of the more melodic stuff that they had in it. And that's like exactly what Define the Great Line was for me with Under Oath.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And then another band that we've talked about that I love, Dead and Divine, right? You listen to the song The Realist and then go listen to the song Like Wolves off of The Fanciful and
Yeah.
tell me that's not a ripoff of Poison the Well, right? Like and here's the thing, like Dead and Divine's not the only one to do it. They're not the only one to copy that song. That's the one that came to my mind just because I've listened to that album countless times. But that song, that structure, those melodies and stuff like that were copied numerous times off of, like you said, that new wave of post-hardcore.
Yeah.
That bled the line of post-hardcore, metalcore.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. There's another band too that's kind of smaller. They were a solid state band called The Overseer.
Yep.
Just like these guys. So I don't know. It's like seriously like listening to every album of Poison the Well. You're like, okay, they literally influenced whole generations of bands. You know, it's incredible to listen to an artist like that. At this time, though, you can kind of tell that they're changing a little bit who they're touring with. So they've done a lot more hardcore tours with hardcore bands before this, but now they're starting to go with, you know, Rise Against, Rufio was a tour that they were on.
Yeah,
a couple tours
one.
with Thursday. What were some of the other ones? Sorry.
Thursday didn't surprise me, right? Just because
that's true.
Who we know Jeff Rickley is and the bands that he hosted and that he helped to bring up. Like that made a ton of sense to me. Them both coming up at the same time. I was surprised they didn't tour sooner, in all honesty.
Yeah.
But they were with a ton of hardcore bands originally.
They did a tour with The Bled.
Yep.
There's a band too that like, I don't know when was the first Bled album?
Oh, that's going to be interesting.
Are we kind of at the same time here, or do you think there's direct influence?
You know, my guess is it's probably pretty similar time-wise. Let's see. I mean, nope, 2005.
2003 is Past the Flask.
Oh, okay. So
about the same time as this, right?
Yes, but the opposite of December
Right,
from
which sounds more like the Bled, right?
Yes, exactly. So all of that kind of stuff is all happening. Sure, that was all a massive aspect. And again, I already said Misery Signals, but I read something from Killswitch that credits these guys. I read something from Every Time I Die that credits these guys. Like everyone who you would think of that's considered like the metalcore, like probably like 2004 time,
Right.
all gives credit to Poison the
Poison the
Well.
Well. Sure, absolutely. Okay. So online, when I asked people, majority people said this was their favorite album. And it makes sense, right?
Yeah,
It bleeds a lot of lines to a lot of music genres that people like. So
yep,
I can see why more people would like this one because it appeals to a larger audience. So
100%. 100%.
if you're going to recommend Poison the Well to someone that's never heard them, are you recommending this album?
Yeah.
So then we've got the next album, I guess after a little bit of a break. Was it like 5 years?
Yeah. 2007.
Yeah. They dropped the album Versions.
Mm-hmm.
So they also changed labels, I think, for this one too.
Yeah, this was on Ferret.
What do you think of this album? Had you listened to this before? Had you listened to anything after You Come Before You?
No,
Okay. So what did you think of this?
I actually really like it. This is actually probably, let's think. This is probably number 3 on my list. So like if I'm ranking right now, I have The Opposite of December number 1, You Comes Before You number 2. I have Versions at number 3. I actually really really like this album. I didn't the first time I listened to it. It took me a second. I listened to this about 3 or 4 times over the last couple weeks, and the last time I listened to it I was like, "Oh my gosh, okay. I see what they've done here. I get it." And I really, really liked it actually. So it's up there for me for sure.
You also have to kind of remember the time period that this is coming out. This is a problem that we see with a lot of these influential bands that we've gotten into from back in the day, right? I mean, this is 2007 and no one's listening to this anymore.
Yeah.
Especially this sound. If they would have dropped The Opposite of December in 2007, it probably would have gotten traction, right? Because you did have bands like Norma Jean and the Chariot and some chaotic stuff.
Yeah.
People were okay with heavy music. This kind of went against the grain, though, for what we were listening to in 2007.
Yeah. It did for sure.
Think about all the MySpace bands that we're talking about. You throw on Versions compared to Attack Attack, you're in different worlds,
100%. So one of the things that I noted on this album is it's very bluesy. Like blues and metal is a very interesting dynamic, right? Because we talk about Southern riffs, but Southern riffs are typically fast. But then this one slowed it down. So you have that Southern feel, but it's blues. It's a blues feel.
Which which band is like famous for blues riffs in their music is Thrice.
Yeah, exactly.
And you put this up with like Visu and even some of the songs from the Alchemy Index, and you kind of get where. And I guess so Visu comes out in 2005 and this album comes out in 2007. What did we say? Finch was 2005 as well?
Yeah.
Say Hello to Sunshine?
Yeah.
So they're maybe a couple years late to the game, but
maybe.
Do you think it would have received better traction if they'd released this a couple years earlier when you had bands like Finch and Thrice?
I don't think so. I because it's heavier. It's heavier than what you just said there.
No, absolutely.
2007, you have, we called it Risecore, the Rise record bands, right?
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I do think this is when like From Autumn to Ashes fell off.
Mm-hmm.
This is when Alexis on Fire fell off. Like those bands that we've talked about, Boy Sets Fire, this sound just wasn't popular. It
so
just
holding a Wolf by the Ears is 2007 as well.
Yeah, there you go. And we said it on the From Autumn to Ashes episode. We missed that album.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was something that like we maybe listened to it once and then we were just like, okay, but there's other stuff to listen to. And I just I think that these guys and let's group all of those ones in, right? That original late 90s, early 2000s metalcore, post hardcore scene, they just got weeded out for a minute. You
Yeah.
know, people weren't as excited to see them. Like I said, when we saw these guys in 2007 with Under Oath and who did I say was on that show? Under Oath, Maylene,
Maylene.
Every Time I Die.
Yeah.
I was 100% there for Under Oath. That was by far the band that I wanted to see the most on there. I loved Maylene. And then Every Time I Die was the up and comer, right? Because we'd started playing like Guitar Hero and stuff. Poison the Well,
Yeah.
nothing on my radar.
Yeah. And
So
yeah. So like I'm kind of in the same boat. And it was the same with From Autumn to Ashes and Boy Sets Fire, right? Where
yeah,
it's like, okay, there's all these newer bands. I'm at an age where like I can drive and go buy my own records now. I can drive and go to my own shows. I don't have to go with my brother. I don't have to go with my mom. I don't have to go with whoever. Like I can do my own thing. I can discover my own music. And that's what I'm listening to Every Time I Die. That's what I'm listening to, stuff that I found when I saw that bands like Poison the Well, like From Autumn to Ashes, like Boy Sets Fire were playing. It was a huge cherry on the top because those are nostalgia bands that I grew up with that I was a big fan of. But you're right. I don't know that I was going for them,
yeah, yeah.
and I've said it before now. This will be the third time on a band like this is I wonder if these guys come out with another album, but you got to wonder if they're looking around and they're like, I don't
What are
shop
we
at Hot
doing?
Topic.
Yeah,
I don't wear fingerless gloves. I don't know any
yeah,
of these guys, you
right.
know,
No,
but then they release
100%
a
on
banger
that.
after. So I don't know. I guess they weren't that much
See,
like it.
okay, so tell me this then. Where do you rank this album? It sounds like you have this at the bottom.
This one is more towards the bottom for me.
Okay, I gotcha. I got really into the blues sound, which they
Okay.
continue on the Tropic Rock, but this one was like that heavy, heavy blues sound.
And I will say that that's the cool part about this album is when they get to the like more post-hardcore stuff, but when the heavy songs on this album are just nasty.
Yeah.
Like they're just so good. The notches that create
Yep.
your headboard. Like that song is so freaking good.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's chaotic, it's like fast, but it's not like thrashy fast. Like it's still, and it's just heavy,
Yep. And then if you
So
wanted to slow it down like that, the songs that I pulled out here were like Nagana, however you say that one, or Pleading Post. Those were the ones that like caught me. That was like, oh, that's sick. You know what I mean? Like you just sit there, you just kind of bob your head to it as it's just kind of going on.
Say Hello to Sunshine from Finch is one of my least favorite albums from them. So like
Yeah.
this sound is cool and like I can listen to it, but it's not like top of my list. I'm going to listen to the chaotic-y post-hardcore kind of dark sounding stuff. You know what I mean?
And
So
had you asked me 5 years ago, this would be the very bottom of my list.
yeah.
Like I know for a fact, like honestly, it's because of doing this. The more stuff we've listened to, the more we've gone back to things and like understanding where like falls in the hierarchy and like how it's all coming together and stuff. Like this stuff has really jumped up my list.
Yeah.
But 2007, had you turned this on, I would have like thrown it out the car window.
But you know
kind
what's
of thing.
interesting? Yeah, I know you say that, but like, you know what's interesting is who were they writing this album to in 2007? It's not to you and
Themselves.
me.
No.
Well, not
it's
even
them.
that. It's to in 2007, I'm 16, 17. So it's to the like 20-year-old. It's the early 20s college kid that's listening to this, right? Because the kid that found them during the opposite of December, which when you're in your 20s, your sound starts to change too. And I don't know. Like I could see we talked about this with MySpace that like the generation before us was not on MySpace listening to Attack Attack
Right.
or Kill Whitney Dead. They're not doing it.
Right.
Like they're still listening to these bands, and I bet you that this sound change landed a lot better with them than it did us in 2007.
Maybe, but I honestly think though that's also the time period where you kind of stop going to shows in a lot of people's situations, a lot of people's cases. It's when you start dating, it's when you start going to parties. It's like it's a time period where you don't have as much free time, right? And so they quickly went from being the headliner to being the opener,
Yeah.
right? Probably 2004, they were still the headliners. 2007, they are the opener on that Under Oath tour, which is weird.
Crazy, because none of those bands would have been around if it wasn't for them.
If it wasn't for them.
Could you imagine? Dude, that's super weird to think about. Could you imagine being a band and it's like one of the greatest bands of all time is your opener?
Like they probably just like got out of their van every day and just walked around like this, just to everyone. And for those who are just listening, I'm just sitting here with two middle fingers up, right? It's just like
Probably,
they walked around and they're just like, "You aren't here without me," kind of thing.
I don't know. Like, I don't think I need to look this up. I would almost guarantee that every single one of those bands accredit Poison the Well in some fashion as a major influence.
Well, Keith Buckley.
Under Oath, Every Time I Die, Maylene, guarantee you every single one of them has Poison the Well as a top 3 influence for them.
100%. I know Keith Buckley has talked about them. Maylene comes from Florida, right? They were actually Florida kids.
Cut from the same cloth. Absolutely.
Yep, that is for sure going to be a huge band for them. Under Oath's Florida too. That's 2 Florida
exactly.
bands. So without question, these guys were big influences there.
I couldn't imagine that. Let's get to the last album then, real quick. The last album, The Tropic Rot, comes out in 2009, and it is on Ferret again. What did you think about this one?
This one was hard for me to listen to at first. It's the same thing as Versions. Like, it took me a minute to understand what they were doing. Once I kind of like settled in and just started to like not compare it to their metalcore sound, not even compare it to You Come Before You. Once I just started to like just kind of separate them, this is a great album. It's really good. It's heavy at times.
Yeah.
The lyrics, the vocals, like all that stuff get out there. Yeah. Right? It's aggressive.
It is very aggressive.
It's solid. It's a great album.
It's almost the epitome, and we say this every single time, and it is almost the epitome of it is heavy without being heavy. Like some of the riffs, like I was just thinking about the song Cinema.
Yeah.
Like you just listen to the riffs and that, and you just want to like stank face. I mean, you're just like that is nasty.
Yes.
You know, and it's not like I'm headbanging going nuts. It's more of like oh man, this is gritty. Grit. It is gritty. That is, I think, the perfect word to describe. It's just gritty. Like this album is so gritty, and I love it. I really, really like this album, and I have a ton of respect that in 2009 they drop an album like this.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. It was pretty interesting. I'm not sure if it was for this album or for Versions, but I did listen to one interview with the guitarist. And what they were saying is whatever label or whatever management they were working with at the time came to them and started giving them pointers. They wanted their input on their album. And these guys were like, you saw what we did before, leave us alone. And they kept like egging them on. And so the guitarist like literally was like, I made the worst demos I possibly could. He's like, I would like create high-pitched feedback, record that, put it into headphones, record through the headphones the high-pitched feedback, and give that to them as demos just to piss them off. So like they were just showing their frustration. And finally they got to the point where I think it might have been management. Maybe this was for Versions when they separated for them and Atlantic. But it got to the point where whatever it was, they separated, and then they were able to do their own thing. And because of that, though, he said like Tropic Rot is just aggressive. We made this. Let's see. We made this to sound very frustrated and antagonistic.
Good. I mean, that's exactly what it sounds like.
Yep. Like it nailed it, right? So I don't know, man. It's crazy. It's an interesting album, and I do think that now these guys are starting to pull from some of the bands that they helped to bring up.
Sure,
Right? You
sure.
get a lot of Every Time I Die influence from this on this album.
Well, you say Pole, they just matured that sound because they were already doing it. It was like, this was my final form. Here we
Yeah,
go.
yeah. I mean, I think that the structure of the songs and stuff feel very similar to Every Time I Die on some, especially the one that you just said, Cinema. It feels very Every Time I Die-ish, in my opinion. And so, at some point you're going to start pulling influences from other people as well. And so I think that that was probably being played around. The other kind of bands I thought about that maybe there was some influence from is actually like a He Is Legend, right?
That's a good one.
I know He Is Legend pulled from them for
Yeah,
sure, no questions asked.
right. Especially,
But
was it I Am Hollywood? Is that the album
yes,
name? Yeah,
yes.
especially that album, 100%.
And then Attack of the Dungeon Witch, isn't that the second one? Like,
Is that the second one, or is it Suck Out the Poison?
oh, Attack of the Dungeon Witch is a song. Yeah.
Ah,
Suck out the
okay,
poison.
okay,
You're
yeah,
right. You're
yeah.
right. You're right.
Okay,
You can
maybe, I don't know.
totally hear the Poison the Well influence, but I also wonder, I think Suck Out the Poison was 2008, if I remember right.
Something like that, yeah.
And that one started to slow down a little bit, and you had some of those riffs. So I'm almost wondering if some of that stuff started to flood into these guys. Like,
Yeah.
it all just comes back full circle. But yeah,
And
so sick.
using the term like gritty is a perfect way to describe a lot of He Is Legend as well.
Yes.
So you can see the influence with that, but I really freaking like the Tropic Rot. It's not an album. I don't think it's an album that I can like just put on and listen to. I have to kind of be in the mood for it because of that, and like Versions is good, but Versions didn't like hit the chord for me like this album did.
I feel like this is going to be a weird statement because I actually still think Versions is better than this album, but this album stepped up Versions. You get a little bit more chaotic again, but you still have the bluesy undertones, a lot of that kind of feel, but then they just amplified it a little bit. And I think that's why I actually prefer Versions. I like the kind of scaled back a little, like it's heavy. It's just a heavy, good feel, but it's like a little bit slower, not quite as chaotic. This one starts to get into that chaotic realm again, especially like a Cinema and stuff like that, which I think is why, again, I have like Versions, Tropic Rot, and then I have Tear from Red on the bottom.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Check out this tour though in 2009. There was a tour, and I must have not come to Utah because I know that 100% we would have been there. It's called the 10 for $10 tour.
Okay.
And it was Poison the Well, Madball, Vision, War of Ages, This Is Hell, Death Before Dishonor, Trapped Under Ice, Crime in Stereo, The Ghost Inside, Terror, Bane, and the Mongoloids.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
For $10?
There's no way that came through Utah.
No, because I know we would have been there, but that's probably, out of all the bands that we've talked about, that's probably the most stacked tour that we've ever talked about.
Oh yeah. No, that would be incredible to go to something like that.
It's wild. So,
but
yeah. All right. Well, this is a band that is still very important to me. I remember listening to them as a kid and being like, this is a sound that I can get behind. I can't remember what tour it specifically was, but I can remember my brother coming home from seeing them and his shirt was all ripped up.
Yeah.
And there was like blood on the sleeve or something. And I was like, dude, what happened? And he's like, that's just what the pits are like at a Poison the Well show. And I was like, I'm ready. Like that sounds amazing. Like, what a good band. What an influential band. We talk about bands like Converge and Earth Crisis that revolutionized metalcore, but I don't know how you can talk about metalcore and not bring these guys up.
Absolutely, without question. And as we're wrapping up here, I'm very mad at myself. we have a buddy on Instagram who gave us crap for calling Fourier showing Fourier. And I said, when we do the Poison the Well episode, I'm just going to refer to him as Poison the whole time. I totally missed it. Missed the opportunity. So, my man, if you hear this, message me. They're affectionately referred to as Poison here. Poison TW. So,
yeah. But yeah, what a great band. I'm going to start selling plasma or something right now so that I can make it out to Furnace Fest and see these guys. Cause they're a reason, especially after doing this again, there'll be a reason why I go out there. I know we said that tour, we didn't go to see them. If I go to Furnace Fest this year, they're a reason why I'm going. So
100%. They would be up on top of my list. Like out of those 4 bands, like I still probably put Under Oath number 1, but Poison the Well is number 2.
Yeah.
And then Shai Hulud, then Stretch.
So. I mean, the way like my music tastes have changed, Under Oath's at the bottom of that list for me right now.
Is it really?
It's Shai Hulud, these guys, Stretch Armstrong, and then Under Oath.
No, man. This was a good call out. This was a good pick. So I think it's me this week. Not sure where we're going to go with it. So I got to give it some thought. I know Josh will be back next week. So
are we doing the Donny Osmond or whatever?
We should just do like Vegas residency artists.
best people to play through Vegas residencies.
So who do we have? We have Katy Perry, Donnie and Marie Osmond.
They'll win though. Absolutely, they'll win. They have to.
There you go. But no, I'll give it some thought and I'll throw it out there. And if you're a young band, if you are playing currently and wanting to kind of get your name out there, hit us up on socials. We're going to continue on 2024 with the lesser known bands, and hopefully we get a few more people on the pod. That was a really fun one with Interpersonal, and we're hoping to do more of that. So
yeah, and the next episode is going to be that, right? We're going to talk about a couple smaller local bands that we've found that smack real hard. So
yeah,
cool, man. Well, thanks.
Good episode. We'll catch you later.
See ya.
Peace.